Matt, good evening. Thank you so much for taking time for joining me tonight, and welcome to the All Around Adventure podcast.
Man, thanks for having me. And again, I apologize for our little schedule mishap for last week, but no, thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man, I've been looking forward to this conversation. I started following you maybe about a year ago, and I just saw all this really amazing physical training that you were doing, a lot of unconventional and unorthodox work. But then, as I kind of got to learning more about you, I also found that you and I are kind of sort of cut from the same cloth, both Michiganders and both Marine Corps veterans. So
Yeah.
if we can go back here a little bit here, what kind of set you down that path to join the Marine Corps? When was that? How old were you, and what led you to make that decision?
So my story to the Marine Corps is pretty funny. I was 26 when I joined. So I was being anything older than 20 in boot camp, you're old. So I was at a point in my life, I was living in Michigan, um, working for Scott's Lawn Service, spreading lawn fertilizer, and all I wanted to be in my life. So, um, so many societies, you be an archaeologist, right? So many societies have these trials of manhood, right? And like our society, our modern day society doesn't really have that. So like, I think that's why you see a lot of depressed men right now is, what is there really to challenge us anymore? It's just, life gets too soft and easy. But anyway, I don't want to get too far into the weeds. So that's what I was feeling. And meanwhile, there's a war going on, and I felt like I needed to make a drastic change in my life. So I initially was going to join the army with my younger brother, who did eventually join the army. So go to the recruiting station, had an appointment with a sergeant, and from the army, he did not show up. So I walk outside, and out comes walking this Marine, right? And he's wearing his dress blue deltas, right, short sleeves, and smoking a cigarette, and he's in like in good shape. He looks over at me, he's like, hey, he's like, what's going on, man? I was like, hey, how you doing? And he just asked when I was there. And I was like, well, I was supposed to meet this sergeant. And, at the time, I was 185 pounds. I was bigger than I am now. I was, because I've worked out my whole life pretty much. I started working out, I think, at 16. So he's like, he just played it off cool. And then he's like, why not just work out and get paid for it? He's like, what do you think we do in the Marine Corps? And I looked at him like, and 2 weeks later, no shit, 2 weeks later, I was on my way to Paris Island. So that would have been December. I got to Paris Island December 15th, 2008. I got to Paris Island. I was assigned to the 3rd Battalion Kilo Company, in 3020. And that's where like this journey, like I would say my life properly started at that point, was going through that, but that's what set me on the path to the Marine Corps, was just me being really, I guess, unsatisfied with the life decisions I had made. And, I figured what more extreme change could I like elicit for myself than to, well, how would I be in a chaotic situation like combat? There's no guarantee. Obviously, you join the Marine Corps, there's no guarantee you're going to deploy or see combat. It's a very rare thing. But I figured if I joined the infantry, that would drastically increase my chances of going to combat, and I did. So, ultimately, it fulfilled that need that I guess I'd had for so long. And I came out of it with some mental scars, but I think overall, I would call it a net positive experience. And I mean, I'm glad I went down that route. I'm glad I made that decision, because it was a very significant, probably top 3 decisions of my life was joining the Marine Corps. So
And you did mention that this was kind of something that's been brewing over years, that you were kind of sort of feeling this way. But was there like a certain thing that had happened or a certain thought that came through your head that kind of served as like the tipping point, like maybe the final straw that, all right, that's it. I need direction. I'm going in the military. Enough is enough. Anything like that? Or was it really just the accumulation throughout the years?
It was an accumulation. Like I said, I was in a dead end relationship, had a renting a house, and I didn't see, um, I just didn't see good prospects in the near horizon, and so I just, I just decided to make that extreme decision, whether at the time the girl I was engaged to, whether she wanted to be a part of it or not, I didn't really care because I'm like, look, I got to do this. And ultimately, for the better, it didn't work out. So, no, it was a building up over time, previous poor decisions, quitting on myself before. So, and I actually touched on this in one of my podcasts, um, and yeah. So that's what it was. Is an accumulation of just time and needing to make a reset, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I hear you on that one. So going to Paris Island on 2 weeks notice. Now, I'm sure like many people probably have a pretty good idea of what recruits face in Marine Corps basic training. 12 weeks long, drill instructor screaming in your face. We see those videos, we've seen those
Yeah,
Discovery Show
yeah,
specials and
yeah,
everything like that. Quick movement, lots of physical training, lots of mental
yes.
training. It's like you're beaten down. It's so much is taken out of you. You're broken down to be built back up. So, what were kind of sort of your own? I kind of call them inner mantras, just something that you were kind of just keeping within yourself to kind of help you get through what is considered to be the toughest basic training in the U.S. military.
So basically, that would have been our. You remember on the rifle range, they had us at the back of our logbooks, our rifle logbooks. We had our PMI, our positive mental, or PMA, our positive mental attitude, right? Like they were so big on that. I think for me, it was just not quitting on myself. I quit on myself in the past, and I think it helped going into it older, being 26 and in really good shape. It was a blessing and a curse actually, because so really to answer your question, I mean, I just I almost approached the training with like disdain, like you can't do anything to me, like this is easy, like this is nothing. So it was almost like I had somewhat of an arrogant attitude because I wasn't. I mean, I was just there for the 12 weeks, so I go ahead and move on to the next phase of what it was to be a Marine. And I went into it 185 pounds, jacked. I've always lifted heavy. Came out of boot camp at like 159,
Oh,
because, well,
wow.
yeah, well, I mean, there was a lot of factors. I got bilateral pneumonia. So I
Mm.
got fungal pneumonia in both of my lungs. And it just so happened that I found out about it during the rope and gas chamber experience. Because I'd already been feeling off. And, you run everywhere with your day pack. So we're running every fucking where we went, you're running. So like we're running to the course, and I'm just like, man, my chest feels real tight and heavy, and I'm kind of like it's making me feel weird. So do the rope climb, the tower and the rappelling, and then next, is the gas chamber. So we get our gas mask on, and then like shuffle us into the chamber. And of course, they have us doing jumping jacks and push-ups, and they're throwing discs of freaking CS pucks in there, and it's just CS gas all over. Well, like remember, I'm the big jack dude in boot camp, and I suddenly realized I'm like I can't breathe. I'm like, and the drill instructors, it was like blood and water, and I was surrounded by sharks. They're like, "Whoa, we got one." I was like, "No, man, there's actually something wrong." I'm like, but the next thing I know, I'm trying to get out of the gas chamber. It takes 5 drill instructors just to keep me in because I'm like, some of them aren't very big, man. And I'm like, I'm much stronger than some. So it takes 5 of them. And here I am in the gas chamber with no fucking gas mask at this point. And I'm in there the entire time inhaling, where to a point, it stopped affecting me. So if you can withstand the first 3 minutes of CS gas with no gas mask, you're going to be okay. You can just walk right through it. And and so I went through that, and the next day I was like, I went to I went to the corpsman, and sure as shit, they sent me to get X-rays. Like, dude, you got bilateral pneumonia, man. Like, there's fluid in the bottom of both your lungs. Luckily, my senior drill instructor was cool, Staff Sergeant Tamala, and he was about my age. And I was the first squad leader, in the platoon. So like I'm always was right there, front and center. And it happened to be the beginning of grass week and rifle and stuff like that. So thankfully I didn't get dropped and I recovered. So by the time we went back to being trained by the drill instructors after rifle qualification, I was I'd lost a bunch of weight, man. So like it was so I came out of boot camp really like the skinniest I'd been in a very long time. So it was pretty interesting.
Did you have a favorite training event? For me personally, when I think about this out loud, I think of my 3rd round of Pugil sticks because I missed the 2nd round because I got my wisdom teeth pulled. And so I was on bed rest for that time. But then when I went to the 3rd round, the Thunderdome. Now I was in San Diego, so a little bit different setup than what you had over in Paris Island. But I remember I stood on my lane going into the Thunderdome. I see my opponent over on the other. I just make a mad dash in there with all this aggression. And then, of course, as soon as I make it in there, come to find out they flooded the place. Like I had water up past my knees. And then I rush over to the other door. And then my opponent still hasn't made it in yet. And then as soon as I see his head poke around from there, I just start wailing on him with the Pugil sticks. And he didn't fight back like at all. Like he just had no will to try to like raise those Pugil sticks and try to fight me until eventually like one of the drill instructors grabs him like, by the face mask of his helmet. And he says, "You better fucking fight." So I felt pretty good about my little victory there, breaking this guy's will to fight. So that was kind of exciting. But what about you? Did you actually have like a favorite training event?
No, you know what? I think I enjoyed the Crucible the most. I liked the culminating event of it, and it was just a good experience. I liked the Pugil sticks. It was funny because I have kind of a similar story where like my staff sergeant, my senior drill instructor. This is probably another reason why he was really cool with me. They're the recruit. He absolutely hated. So it came time to do the Pugils. For us, we had to do it on this log, right? There's like a log, and you got to beat the shit out of each other on the log with these Pugil sticks. Then he pulls me aside. He goes, "Hey, if you go in there and you kick this shit out of," I forget the kid's name. He's like, "I'll let you make a phone call tonight." And so, dude, I went on and just pummeled this poor kid to death. Like he didn't really even fight back. I just, and of course I got to make a call that night. So it was but the Puma sticks were fun. I had a lot of fun with it. But the Crucible, I think I enjoyed it because over that 3-day period, it's like you're doing this stuff that you figured you'd be doing in the military, in the Marine Corps, just patrolling and just kind of learning the basics of just being a Marine, So yeah, I'd probably say the Crucible. And the hike back was, I think I fell asleep once or twice in the middle of the hike. And, it's funny. I don't think people realize that you can be so tired that you fall asleep while you're actually hiking. It's like it can totally happen. And it happened to a lot of us because you're up for, I think we got a couple hours of sleep a night or something like that. And maybe 2 hours or something. And so, yeah, I definitely dug the Crucible, man. It was a good experience.
Right on. So that was basic training, and then of course you said you went on into the infantry from there. So What are some highlights that you recall from your service that maybe you could share with us? I mean, of course, we won't be able to cover everything in this episode, but throughout your time, and then maybe you can also cue us in onto when you actually got out of the Corps as well. Yeah, what are some like kind of key memories from your military service that stand out to you?
It was definitely well, I don't know. I tell people I had the 5-star experience. So yeah, I went through infantry training, became a machine gunner. And what's funny about that is, were you in the infantry?
No, I was actually Air Wing administration for an Osprey squadron.
So I forget. I think it's about the third week or something like that. They start splitting you up, and you got to choose your MOS. And so I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So that day, we happened to run an obstacle course, and of course, at this point, I'd regained most of my size and strength. Because I had a month between boot camp and infantry training where I got did recruiter's assistance. But so I came back to SOI looking good, healthy, strong again, and we do the O course, and I get to the rope and I just arm it all the way. Don't use my legs. Boop 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 on the top. And one of the staff sergeants just looks at me and goes, "Hey, you're a machine gunner." And so that's how I became a machine gunner. And then, which was the coolest job to have. I mean, we spent ungodly amounts of hours disassembling and reassembling Mark 19s, the 240 Bravo, and the Mark 250 cal. So we knew those weapon systems intimately, which was really cool. But then once I got to the fleet, I got to First Battalion, Ninth Marines, the Walking Dead, and we did our first workup for our first deployment, which was the 24th MEU that responded to Haiti after the 2010 earthquake. So the one that hit them back in 2010, we we were the ones that responded. We were like the initial responding force even before the army had gotten there. So we spent 3 weeks or so, kind of like helping that area until the army got set up and national aid came and stuff. And then we pushed. I don't know. We went to some like 12, 13 countries. I got to train with the French Foreign Legion in Africa. Got to go to Seychelles, which is in the southern equator, and there's people in the Navy. It's like a big deal in the Navy. It's like a huge deal to go down past the equator. So there's this, they call, I don't know, man, shellback ceremony or something. It's just like I don't know. It's all good fun. It's like hazing ritual, but yeah, man, it's a big deal to cross cross that. So got to go to Seychelles, see a bunch of parts of the world, all through the UAE, Bahrain, Qatar. I mean, Kuwait, we trained all over the place. And then we went through Europe, Greece, and stuff like that. So that was a really good experience. And then next deployment 8 months later was Afghanistan, a combat deployment in Afghanistan. And I would say that 7 months is probably the most life altering 7 months I'd ever really experienced. Being in Afghanistan, and then not only being in Afghanistan, but being like in the infantry, and then, you know, being pushed out beyond the lines. It's you and your platoon of 38 dudes way out in the middle of nowhere. Like if we get attacked, it's going to be some time before help comes our way. It'll still be 5 to 10 minutes for even a jet to respond. And that's an eternity in combat hour. Like in combat time, that's an eternity. So, there's always just this angst and this edginess, and it's like, you go on patrol, and we saw a pretty good amount of combat. I went through some significant experiences with that. We had September 29th. I've written about this, but that for me, I won't. I've written about it. I've got like podcast episodes I've covered, but that was the most intense firefight I'd been in, and it was one of those situations where It was like your very typical being complacent, where it was supposed to be like an easy 4-hour patrol, right? And I was the patrol leader. I was the corporal, I was the patrol leader. And so I made the decision like, hey, we're going to pack light because we're just going to do our thing, hurry back. And then that was our last patrol before our turnover. So every 4 days, one squad would be on patrol while another one would be manning the posts and the COC, the corporal of the guard manning the radios and stuff. And then we had a big G-Boss camera tower that you could look. So we every 4 days we'd alternate. So this would have been our last patrol until we got like a 4-day break essentially. And of course we get into this hellacious firefight, and nobody got hurt, but we caused pretty significant damage to the enemy. And so that was a pretty significant moment. And I would say that memory indelibly is stamped into almost everything I do now, because really I think we only took 8 wounded. I don't know if we might have had 1 KIA, but it was coming back, where we had been back a year and already had lost like 13 Marines to like the random death, like suicides, like driving recklessly, overdoses, just a really dark, man. And then post Afghanistan was a super dark time, man. Like I had a good Marine friend. The night he killed himself, myself and my ex-wife, we were the last ones to see him. And, it left a very thick scar, for something like that, because the guilt you carry around is like, that's a tough thing to deal with. But, I eventually got out, and this is just an abridged version of everything, but I eventually got out. And at the time, my ex-wife, she was a hippie, and like she wanted to be around her hippie friends. And I was like, okay, we moved to this rural southwestern Missouri, had a little homestead. So we go down to this little hippie music festival, Bird Fest in Arkansas, and I eat psilocybin mushrooms and have this intense psychedelic experience. And it profoundly changed the way I saw the world. Like, because of that experience, I started writing. I decided I was going to go back to college. I just started doing all this stuff that I'd been putting off for some reason. It was like it busted this crust. And so then for a number of years, I took a little detour into psychedelics, wrote about psychedelics, because the effects were lasting. So really what you see right now through me on Instagram is ultimately me not just like sharing what I do to work out. That's only like that's the sugar, like that's the icing on the top. But really the good shit is under that in the stuff I write about. Because the little blurbs I'm writing, I always try to relate it to I do know something about, and how I've dealt with it, and ultimately letting people know that they're not alone, especially men. I think there are men in depression right now. So I think men need to understand that that's normal, and you can overcome that. It's just, so yeah, I share my struggles, and I try to be as transparent as I can. So, but yeah, psychedelics were a huge part of that after the Marine Corps. So yeah, and then with the writing thing, so this would have been back in 2015. I think I would have had that experience, 2014, 15. And that's when I started writing, and I haven't stopped. I've taken some detours. I got into jujitsu, and that like kind of took up a lot of valuable time that I'm okay with. I'm glad I did it. And I'm on a hiatus, but I will get back to training jiu-jitsu. But it got me back into my writing. And so I just recently finished my master's degree, got a certificate for business writing. and I'm editing my first manuscript. I wrote the first draft, and now I'm editing it, like going, polishing it and getting it ready because I'd like to submit it, for hopeful publication. But man, we'll see. But yeah, that's like the that's the big broad arc of sort of my experiences so far. Oh, and then I lived on the road. Um, so your podcast is about traveling. So from 2019 to 2021, almost all through COVID, I literally lived on the road full time. With Sold my house, got divorced, packed up what I could. I bought a Chinook RV and a little cargo trailer, loaded it up with a motorcycle and all my gym equipment. And literally for like 2 years, I just traveled across the country and lifted wherever I was staying, out in the desert. Like I've lifted in the Badlands and, just all over the place. And so that was a really cool experience to see the country in a way that most people don't ever get, because most people are just going across the interstates. I always took the old forgotten county highways, and it was a really awesome experience. But I did it because I wanted it to inform my writing. I wanted to like be in the landscapes that I figured my story that I was writing was going to be set in. So I almost immersed myself in like that creative process. But the problem was I I didn't write a lot. I just got caught up in the moment of being on the road, which I'm super glad I did. I documented it. I've got tons of pictures, video, drone footage. And so that was a really, really cool time. But yeah, that encapsulates really probably the last, since I've been out of the Marine Corps, to, to answer you long-winded, in a long-winded way.
Nah, I love it, brother. And that is one thing I have noticed. When you talk about packing up all your gym equipment and hauling it in the trailer, well, even now that it seems like you're kind of a little bit more stationary, I have noticed that every time you post training content, you're never in like an actual conventional gym. You're not even inside. You're always outside. You see trees and the sky, open sky above you, and
Yeah,
you're rolling around on your mat in the grass, and you got your
yeah,
axle bar and all this other really cool stuff. Has that
yeah.
always kind of been your training style? Like even going back into the Marine Corps, maybe even before. Kind of tell us about like that evolution.
No, actually, no. It's weird. I was a meathead. I was a total traditional meathead. So I started working out at probably I was 16, and I like my parents got a Bowflex. So I started lifting on a Bowflex. And well, about a year later, I wanted to get into free weights. And so when I was 17, I basically started training with free weights, and I never looked back. Like that was a huge, like that was it. I was like, okay, this is it. And I followed a very basic power building program, 3 sets, low reps, high, heavy weight, one body part a week. Did some cardio. I did run for a period, but and then that's kind of how, even through the Marine Corps, I still trained like a meathead. Although it what I the seeds of how I train now were planted in the Marine Corps. So, being in the infantry, we would always be out in the field training or, being deployed. I bought a pair of a set of TRX straps from the PX, and so I took those everywhere with me. So whenever I was out in the field, I was still training. I was still doing like I didn't know it at the time, but I was doing unconventional training. I'd be lifting our water jugs because you know how heavy those are when you fill them up. Those are great. That's like 45, 50 pounds that I could just lug around and lift and pull. I was a 50 cal gunner on my truck team. So I always had the 50 cal. So, that together weighs like 76 pounds. The barrel's like 43. So like I got all this weight to play with and I could just pick it up. And so I would do that in between but then when I get back to when we get back to the barracks, I'd go right back to the gym and lift like a fucking bodybuilder again. Where it's like, so I totally missed out on that opportunity in the Marine Corps. If I trained like I do now in the Marine Corps, I would have, I probably would have stayed and like I don't know. I would have been in probably a much better place, like my body, probably my mind, but it wasn't until I got into wanting to get into jujitsu, or actually, let's rewind real quick. Living on the road was the next step in how I train right now, because even on the road, I made some changes. Instead of doing like single body parts, I do 2 or 3 whole body workouts per week. And then I would just mix. So each session I would change up exercises and do, so my body wouldn't get too worn out on the same movement patterns. But I was still doing mostly traditional stuff. However, I was starting to implement farmer carries, trap bar. I had my trap bar deadlifts, my trap bar, so I'd use that for carries. And then I had I only had my axle bar. That was the only bar I had. So like, so then I started using my axle bar for everything, for bench pressing, for and like really helped with my grip. And so when I decided to get back off the road, I got a place, and then I decided that I wanted to get into jujitsu. And that's when I realized, I'm like, I think there's a better way to train for something as dynamic as jujitsu. And that's when I started, like, I kept all my training logs from when I was in Afghanistan. Like, I have all my train. It was literally a diary, but it was my training log. So I have all my training numbers. I could go to my closet right now and pull out my green book that I had with me in Afghanistan, which is my workout log, and I can tell you what I did on like October 23rd. I can tell you my workout, and then I probably have a note of how I was feeling. So I'm really glad I did that. But anyway, um, and then I started following Jailhouse Strong, which is a really, really great site for strength and unconventional conditioning. I don't know if you know who Tom Haviland is, but Tom Haviland is this absolute giant of a man. And we connected well before he ever, like, we connected when he only had like 4,000 followers, and he was kind of like an unknown, and then he just, his page just blew up because he's just this giant. Anyway, so he's also part of that Jailhouse Strong brand, and I got their book. What was it? The book was Tactical Strongman, and so I used that to inform how I was going to structure my training, and then I kind of put my own spin on it, and it kind of made it my own, what it is now. And I started training like that, probably what you see now. I started doing 3.5 years ago, maybe. And it's just funny, the strength I've cultivated in these last 3 years, 3.5 years, is degrees above and better than any strength I developed even when I was younger. Tossing around these heavy sandbags, mace bells. Now I'm starting to slowly get into kettlebell work. I'm 44, man, right? I'm 44. So I refuse to use that as like some excuse for me to like let up on. I should always strive to be strong, but really a big change I've made in the last year is doing more flexibility, mobility. Um, I follow Juji Mufu, and like we just did a video together, which was really awesome. But I started watching him and seeing he was sort of transitioning from what he did before, where it was almost like lifting heavy and stuff, to where now you see he does a lot more movement. He's a lot more about how the body, and I think that just happens as we get older. We realize that really, if we want to maintain our ability to move, like, you have to work at it. You just have to work at it a little bit more. So I've made that big adjustment in this last year, but that I don't really record any of that. That's just stuff I do off camera. But yeah, I think ultimately training for me is about constantly finding ways to make your training more efficient, finding ways to keep it fresh, because then it'll always be stimulating. Because what started happening with me and the way I was training with that power building routine is it just gets monotonous, where it's this linear progression. And I use micro plates, fraction plates. So I never really made big jumps. So I was always able to sort of make progress, but it was, I don't know, it was just kind of unfulfilling where every time I have to pick up my 200-pound sandbag, there's still this little, like, I get a little nervous because it's just an intimidating thing, like, and I think people that use sandbags will understand because, that weight can really go in a way you don't want it to. And wielding around a big sandbag like that, it requires a lot of strength. And so, yeah, man, it's like, that's just, yeah, that's an important, I think, aspect of, well, I said this to Juji. I think if I didn't have the structure I had right now, which the nucleus of that is physical training, because I wake up at like 7:15. By 8:45, I'm on my air diet and I do an hour of zone 2 cardio. And that kicks off my day. I do it fasted, I don't eat. And then after that, I do a little body weight session, push-ups, whatever versions, and then I stretch. And then I might do some mobility work. And then I dive into my writing because I have this time to think about what I need to work on with my writing. So physical training, and especially the way I train out, is sort of the base I've built all this, like, my creative endeavors off of. And people, I think, forget that you can do that. You can be both things. You can be physical and still be creative. It's not exclusively one or the other. So yeah, I think those are like my those two things in my life right now is training and writing. Like, yeah, that balances me at the moment, and my dogs.
Well, of course,
So,
the body and mind don't work in isolation. They work in tandem with one another,
yeah,
right? Yeah. One thing that I've kind of noticed, and you might have observed this as well, Matt, is that the people that whether I know them personally or while I tend to observe them, those that I see that tend to be like the most angry, the most impatient, the most sad, the most upset, the most, fill in the blank with whatever negative emotion you can think of. A common denominator that I tend to observe is that they don't work out. Like, they don't make fitness a regular part of their life. Whereas those that I know who make it a point to go get their training session in, regardless of how they feel, whether they feel like training or not, they still go do it because that's just how they've like hardwired themselves to do. Let that discipline take over, right? So I think that's just really what it kind of like boils down to, is that if you look after your body, your mind is naturally just going to feel like a lot better too. And then of course, like you said, it gets those creative juices flowing too. Whether you're
yeah,
writing in your case, or like with me when I'm doing podcasts. I mean, of course, I didn't like start the recording when I did this, but like I mean, I was doing some shadow boxing around my hotel room here before getting on the call with you because I want to get the blood flowing.
nice.
I want to get oxygen to the brain,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah,
now,
yeah, yeah.
another thing I kind of want to ask you, going along with this, is aesthetics. Now, you certainly aren't lacking in the aesthetics department, but has that ever been a goal of yours at all throughout your fitness journey, or maybe even more so now?
No, I never started working out because I wanted to, like, look a certain way. I just wanted to be strong, and it just, I took to it, right? And so, yeah, the aesthetics ish. Yeah, I was never into that. I just wanted to train heavy and I wanted to be strong. Because here's the thing: when you look strong, people just treat you differently, and people hate hearing that, but like that's kind of just psychology, man. I mean, I have rarely had bad experiences with people, and I'm almost positive it's because of the way I look. And it's like, but I'm not a pushover either, And but I also don't. I'm very respectful of people, and like that goes a long way. I'm not an asshole, and I don't try to be an asshole. And I think people pick up on that. They're like, oh, this dude's cool, man. He's like, oh, he's all right. I laugh sometimes because I get that, like, people are like, oh, you're not like a lot of Marines I meet, and I'm like, yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate that. I mean, like, you know how it is, man. So it's like, yeah, I'll take that because I feel like Marines, when they get out of the Marine Corps, there's like two paths. Like, one path, they get out and they live like a normal life, and then the other path, they just become straight up fucking hippies, man. And like, there's really no in between. It's like they either go to having good productive, and I'm not saying the hippies don't, but it's like there's definitely that. I'm sure you've seen it, but there's definitely in all the
Yeah.
branches. It seems like there's this path where either like kind of go back to a normal life, or you just like, nah, man, I'm good. I'm gonna go do some weird shit. I'm gonna go be off in the woods, man. I'm just gonna hang out. But going back to the other part of why I train the way I train now, especially I'm outside, because I think because I have a really good life, I don't have much to complain about, even though I do, but not to anybody. That's the good thing about being by myself is like my dogs don't care how much I complain, so that works out. But I saw like because that shit creeps up on you really fast, and you will never. And it's so insidious that by the time you realize it, it's like, oh, you're already behind the curve. And so it, for me, I've had this fear of that, which I think is a big driving force of just, you know, okay, so this past Sunday it was 12 degrees and snow and like we had 7 inches. And but I already knew I'm like, this is a training day. I, I can sit in my nice cozy home, curl up and read a book. Oh, I could maybe do a little workout in the house. Sure. Or I could just suit up and go outside and train like nothing is wrong. And so I decided just to do that. And so what it does is that there's this element of like, I don't know if hardening is the right term, but it's definitely being acclimated to the physical environment where I, my fingers were sticking to my plates, when I put them on just from the moisture of like when I'd close my hands. So like, but I didn't care because I'm like, well, I'm going to train. And by the time I got into it, I felt fine. You don't really feel anything at that point. So I think it really, when you put yourself in elements like that, it just, for me, it reminds me that I have it pretty easy, like, and I have to counterbalance it with something difficult that I just don't want to do. And I do it. And, I feel really good after. And, that's like, yeah, that's definitely a drug you can't get on the market is that feeling, and that carries over into other things because it's like, yeah, publishing's super difficult to get into. Either whether you self-publish or go through, it doesn't matter. There's like, it's a difficult task, but I think the bar has been lowered so much with like what people put into effort these days that if you just stick it through to the end, you're probably going to be successful because most people just quit nowadays. I mean, a majority of people just give up. Right. And so, I mean, I hate to generalize like that, but it does seem like, people are definitely wanting to maybe veer towards more being cautious or something like that. And I don't know, man. I think, yeah, anyway, but that's kind of going into the weeds a little bit, but it just seems like it is. And for me, as I get older, I need to maintain this level of like physical readiness and preparedness that like, if I need to move, if I need to be agile, if what good is me knowing jujitsu, but yet being too stiff to really apply anything, where now, I'm working on doing the splits and, having that kind of hip mobility is very crucial in something like that. So, um, yeah, man, that's a fear of mine is getting soft. It's like, it's like so generic, but I mean, it is literally something that I'm like, I have to be ever watchful of it, because once you like dial back the intensity, it's really hard to get it back sometimes. A lot of people, that's why I think so many people seem to peak in high school, man. Is like they dial back the intensity for some reason. And I guess, I'm like a late bloomer, man. I'm like at 44, I don't, I think a lot of people give up on what they thought they would have been doing by now, and they just kind of. It seems like they become teachers. I don't mean that as a bad thing, but it sure kind of seems like that's what the fallback is. It's like, well, this didn't work out, but I got a degree, so I guess I'll go teach. And again, not a dig at teachers. But it's like, yeah, I don't know. That I veered off. I veered off there for a minute, but
Well, I think this is even just innate within us as men too. I think as men we want to have utility. We want to be useful. We want to be valuable. I mean, like in my case, like I'm currently like in a relationship, and I may not look it right now, Matt, but I'm actually 40 as we're recording
nice,
this podcast as well. But same
nice,
thing. I do feel like as we get older, we want to keep pushing our foot harder on the accelerator, not let off it, right? Because it's like I still have duties as a man. I still need to protect. I still need to provide, and my abilities to do both of those things are going to be greatly inhibited if I'm out of shape. And same thing,
yeah,
like, and even for men who may not be like in a relationship right now, if you have like a group of men that you're aligned with or that you want to align with, it's the same thing. You brought up this point earlier about that, like, oftentimes like for men who are physically fit, they radiate like a certain degree of competence and capability, which of course is going to be not attractive just to women but also to men as well. Like men want to align themselves with men who are capable, right? So like how has, like, I guess maybe we can even just go like throughout your life too. It's just has that always kind of been like a mindset, something that you've had in the back of your mind? Is training is just I mean, obviously it makes you feel good, it helps your creative efforts, but just again, like for the capability side, of course you were a Marine. I mean, even though now as a civilian, it's not your everyday job to go get into gunfights and kick in doors anymore. But I just do, I feel like that's just something that's a lifelong
right,
journey
right.
for us.
Well, it's applicable to everyday life. I mean, training the way I train, it's like, I have chickens and I have dogs, and so I'm like always hefting around 40-pound bags of feed, and I've got a wood boiler, so I'm always chucking wood, and uh, you know, I the strength cultivated through the way I train is an everyday is like is it that if you could turn farm being like working on a farm, if you turn that in, if you like turn the bales of hay into sandbags like that, you've turned that environment into a training environment. That what I do directly will carry over. I could go to a farm and go chuck bales of hay because like that's what I'm doing with these heavy sandbags and the slam balls. And I've chucked bales of hay, so I know. And so it's like it's the same thing. So I think training in this manner, and it's like, sandbags, it seems like because of social media, it seems like they're super popular and they're everywhere, but really it's super rare you're going to go into a gym and find any. It's and if you do, if they're in the corner with all the kettlebells and like the shit that nobody knows what to do with because they're there to sit on machines and like go through like their physical therapy, and then but all the good implements are off in the corner getting dusty. So but I think it's the most practical way to train if a person just wants to be like durable for life. I mean, look, man, you never know when you'll have to like drag someone to safety, or you never know when you're gonna have to carry an unconscious person, or your mom or your dad who's old and you can't lift them, like they've fallen and you're too weak to pick them up. It's like, no, that's unacceptable. And so I think when you kind of look at it that way, it's almost like I mean, I don't know, man. The joy of writing fiction is I can create like societies, and I have in mind a society that like, what would a society look like where like physical training and eating well and proper was like a tenet of that society's like core belief. With like, what would a society look like that actually took that shit seriously? Like, I don't want maybe even embracing it like a religion, because maybe that's where the tension can come in for the storytelling. But it's like, what would a society look like that treated being physical and physical culture as if it was like their religion? So because I think it's almost a duty for people to train and be in good shape, because what better steward and what better like use of your being here than to be able to like at any point help someone else like physically, like, oh man, carry someone to safety or carry something heavy for someone that can't, so be implemented in school. That should, yeah, I don't think it should really be negotiable, man. It should be a fundamental aspect of who we are, and not even for the looks. Again, the way I train is clearly like you're not going to see bodybuilders train this way, even though I think they benefit from it. Because again, you're going to get thick. Like this builds thick muscle because again, you're working in multiple planes of motion. You're rotating. Sandbag get ups. Like I think those are the most challenging sandbag movement you can probably do is that sandbag get up, and like that thing is freaking brutal, man. And it's working these uneven sides, so. And yeah, I think being 44 and still being able to have like the knee mobility I have, being able to like train plyometrics still have bounce in my ankles, still have a spring in my step. A lot of it I think has to do with the way I train, reinforcing the tendon and ligament, because again, you know, I think you see a lot of this in bodybuilding where people like tear muscles. They just go too heavy too quickly and they don't let their bodies adapt. Where training with the sandbag, it almost forces you to adapt before you're able to move to the next like level. You know what I mean? Like recently I've just gotten comfortable with like training with my 230-pound bag. And now my next step will be my 250-pound sandbag. But that'll be like another process of 6 or 7 months before I even touch it, because I want to get comfortable with 230 pounds before I go to 250. So I've always been like really careful with my training and my progression. I've always progressed because I've been very conservative with weight jumps. Like I never made more than a 5-pound weight jump. So that way I was always on this trajectory of progress. And that's that's how I approach it now. But yeah, ultimately, man, I think training should be a duty, but I think it's a shame a lot of people don't. It baffles me that like a majority of people just don't even think about it. You know what I mean? Like that. And I know people will see that I'm weird. Like, dude, guy's weird. He lives by himself. He talks a lot, and he's this hermit in the woods and trains a bunch. But um, shit, I'm gonna lose my train of thought. Damn it.
Right. Well, yeah,
Yeah,
but
man. I just lost that train. I just lost that train of thought, man.
yeah, well, yeah, man. It's well, and of course, we are barely scratching the surface. There's definitely a lot. I mean, this topic alone, we could probably fill up a couple of podcast episodes on as well, and I'm sure we'll probably do a part two somewhere down the
Yeah,
line.
yeah,
But what I want to
yeah.
ask you, though, is well, for one, how can our listeners and viewers go connect with you, and then also like your with your writing journey? Do you have like any published works out there? Anything that you want to plug in the show?
So right now, the only social media I'm really active on is Instagram, and you can find me at the Heathen Machine, all one word. I had a YouTube channel, and like I might revive it at some point. Same, the Heathen Machine. Um, in terms of writing, I've had a couple pieces published in a journal called So It Goes. It's the literary journal of the Kurt Vonnegut Museum and Library. So I've had some pieces published in those journals. Um, let me see. And right now, I'm working on my first novel called The Skeleton Witch, and I'm actually going through my edits right now. The first draft was freaking 224,000 words, which I banged out in 7 months, dude. Like I was on a, I'm at a point now where I can write about 1,500 words daily. Like, but I had to train myself to that. It took a long time to get to there. But once I was there, man, I sailed 7 months, 224,000 words. Right now, I'm editing. I'm midway through it, and I've already cut probably 80,000 words from the manuscript. So yeah, man, I'm working on that, and my goal is to um, put together a pitch packet and query agents, man. Like I'm gonna go the traditional route to see how it works out. Um, I'm not gonna, I'm gonna keep at it. I know I'll get rejected, so it's just a matter of finding a home for what I'm working on. So I guess it'll probably be dark fantasy is what I'd consider it, but there'll be more to come on that. But yeah, man, that's kind of what I've been working on. I just finished my master's, so that's all squared away. But yeah, man, Instagram is really where I keep most active updates on anything. Even when I start needing to think about advertising, like my writing and my books, definitely I'm going to find ways to integrate it into my workouts. That I'm definitely going to have to get clever with. Because here's the thing, man. People know me for like what I post. So then suddenly there's like, who's this guy like pushing his fucking dark fantasy books on us or something, but come to find out there's a lot of people that have similar taste that I do that follow me. So it kind of works out. So I think I might have found my, at least a core audience, so.
All right, man. And I'll get that linked up in the show notes for this episode. Or if we have viewers watching us talk on YouTube, it'll be down in the description below. Well, Matt, as we start winding down here, I have a few more standard questions that I like to ask all my guests towards the end of the show. And the first thing I like to ask my guests to do is issue a challenge to our listeners and viewers. We got to hear some great stories from you today. We got to get some great insights from you today. But those can really only take our listeners and viewers so far. If they want to go out and do amazing things themselves, they have to follow up what they hear today with action in order to do so. So with that, what challenge would you issue to our listeners and viewers today for them to go out there and start living a more adventurous life?
I would challenge them to stop caring so much about what other people think about them. Doing that frees up so much mind space and the world suddenly opens up. So that would be my challenge.
All right. Couldn't agree more, man, for sure. And what I have for you next is my final three fun questions. At least I like to think that they're fun questions that all my guests get asked at the end of the show. So, of course, you're going to get asked these as well. And the first of these three questions is, what is your favorite place that you've been to so far?
Oh, man.
Wow. I mentioned these were loaded questions.
Dude, like that, it's so funny because like that's such a heavy question because I've been to so many amazing places and they all like elicit an emotional reaction. Like we'll narrow it. I'd say the most amazing place I've been in the United States is in the Black Rock Desert in northwestern Nevada. It's where they have Burning Man at.
Oh, okay.
So I wasn't there during Burning Man. I was probably early April. So there's no, dude, it's a playa. So, and it's one of the flattest places on earth. And it's like, I pull up to there. I forget the name of the little town you drive through where gas is just obnoxiously expensive because it was the only place. But then you get to drive out onto the playa. And when it's like the distances are so vast that it messes with like your depth perception because it's just this flat area and you're surrounded by these mountains and they seem it's almost impossible because like the scale of everything is it kind of messes with the mind. So I'd say that was probably the most amazing place I've been to in the United States for sure.
Right on. Yeah, I haven't been out that way yet, but I'm sure I probably will at some point in time. So maybe not for maybe not for Burning Man, but maybe just in the way that you went and saw it.
April. April's perfect because the days are nice. They're 70s and sunny, and the nights are like in the 30s. It's a good time because there's really no one there. there was like two other campers. Because remember, I was full time I was living on the road full time, and you can go out and camp on the playa for a while, whatever. And yeah, man, I pretty much had it all to myself. So going like April, man, like March, April, it's because it'll snow. Like in the winter, it does snow there. Um, so yeah, I'd recommend it.
All right, right on. All right, so next question in this final three. What is one thing on your bucket list that you have yet to do?
Hmm. Man, probably going sailing. As weird as it sounds, like taking a sailing trip somewhere. I think because like I'll watch those on YouTube. I'll watch those sailing videos and like people living on their yacht, like their sailboats and stuff. And I mean, it's easy to romanticize that. I know it's not easy, but I think that's definitely on the bucket list, man. Is like going on a sailing adventure at some point. I think that'd be really cool.
All right, nice. All right, and the last question, and this is a two-parter. What is your favorite animal, and have you seen this animal in the wild?
My favorite animal. Man, as lame as it sounds, I'd have to say wolves, if I had to pick any animal. And and maybe it is because I've seen them in the wild. I mean, yeah, man, they're like just feral as fuck, and yeah, I don't know, man. Like there's something about wolves. So yeah, I definitely would say wolves.
All
And I've
right.
seen them, yeah, I've seen them out west and like they stayed away, but yeah, it's a pretty surreal experience to see them out like roaming around, especially out west, it's wide open. And so, yeah, man, yeah, definitely wolves.
All right, right on, man. All right, well, Matt, that's it. That's all the questions that I
Cool.
have for you tonight. But before we call it
Awesome.
a day here, let's just recap one more time where our listeners and viewers can go connect with you.
Yeah, just really the Heathen Machine over at Instagram. That's where I keep mostly everything updated. So yeah, if you want to keep updated on what I do, just yeah, go to Instagram and look up the Heathen Machine.
All right, and like I said, I'll have that linked up in the show notes for this episode or down in the description below if we have viewers watching us talk on YouTube. All right. Well, Matt, I want to thank you very much for taking the time for joining me tonight. It's always a rewarding thing for me to be able to connect with a fellow Marine, and it's just even though we're talking for the first time tonight, it just kind of feels like I might have just known you all along. I think that's just something that we as Marines just collectively share. No matter where we come
Yeah, yeah,
from.
yeah, for sure. I appreciate you for having me on too.
All right. Right on, brother.